So it's 2003, and Greg Daniels of Saturday Night Live, The Simpsons, and King of the Hill fame was sitting on his couch. His agent sent him a tape with some British comedy Daniels had never heard of. And then poof, Daniels was inspired. NBC was cautiously compelled to create a localized version of BBC's mega hit comedy, The Office. Compelled because of
$83, still a lot of money.
Well, probably more than that. And cautious because there's been a checkered past of Americans attempting to redo British works. Gervais and Merchant, the creators of the original version, met with Daniels and they hit it off right away, as they were fans of The Simpsons. And they spoke to Daniels about an episode that he himself wrote, in which Homer unintentionally finds himself in a sexual harassment situation. And it just seemed like an Office-type situation. The studio greenlit the creation of a pilot episode to see what Daniels, his assembled staff of writers, and a group of relatively unknown actors, and the much beloved source material could produce. It's probably not a surprise to anybody watching this video that The Office US had a rocky start to say the least. Famously coming up for cancellation considerations had it not been for the sheer foresight and willpower of a handful of NBC executives, the dedication from everyone involved in the series, and Carell's appearance in the 40-year-old virgin.
No, Kelly Clarkson!
And what The Office became was incredible.
People say I am the best boss. They go, God, we've never worked in a place like this before. You're hilarious.
I declare bankruptcy! No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
That's what she said. The worst thing about prison was the Dementors. They were flying all over the place and they were scary, and then they come down and they suck the soul out of your body.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing.
Not enough for me. You are everything. Stop hitting me.
You can do it, just say it.
Hit me again.
The people that you work with are just, when you get down to it, your very best friends. I think that pretty much sums it up. I found it at Spencer Gifts.
The Office had millions of fans during its run, with viewership slowly waning towards the end, but well after the finale ended, The Office picked up millions of new fans crossing national and generational lines, with the series being the most streamed series of 2020 by far.
Well, don't look so surprised.
But in all fairness, its move in the US to Peacock is probably the primary reason for that intense viewership in 2020. Regardless, The Office has an enormous fan base, with online communities on social media hitting astronomical numbers. And I'm just one of those people. I love this show. I think there's genius poured into every episode by everyone involved. I started out this series to call that out. That every episode, even if it's a filler, might be universally panned, might be deemed too cringy for consumption. Every episode of this, it fleshes out these characters a little bit more. And I can remember when the finale hit, I was sitting on my couch and feeling as though life was pulling me away from some friends that I had spent years of my life getting to know, laughing with, crying with, enjoying their company. It's one of my favorite things about The Office is that these people feel relatable, even if they're going through crazy things or they do crazy things.
I drove my car into a lake.
So I don't tout to be the #1 Office fan of all time. I don't pretend to know everything about the series. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get a lot of stuff wrong along the way, and I don't really care. I doubt that's why you're watching this anyway. I'm here to talk about the series I love with people who also love it. So, hey, and welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris, and I'm reviewing every single episode of The Office ever, and today we're kicking everything off with the pilot.
How are things going at the library?
Oh, I told you, I couldn't close it, so.
So you've come to the master for guidance?
And I say kicking off, but really this is a rewatch field guide, meaning that I already reviewed this episode, but I'm coming back later to update it with my new format. I'll talk more about that at the end. The pilot has main writing credits attributed to Greg Daniels, a name I'm going to talk about a lot throughout this series. Daniels is also joined in writing credits with Gervais and Merchant, and this episode was directed by Ken Kwapis, who will have his hand in the show throughout the entire series. The pilot first aired on March 24th, 2005, was viewed by 11.2 million people, eager to see what the American adaptation of the much beloved British comedy would turn out like. The pilot has a well below average rating on IMDb of 7.5 out of 10. Okay, so in each episode I have a series of comment contests. A trivia question, which for the pilot episode is, name Michael's primary influences in life.
People I respect, heroes of mine, would be...
I'll also have an Easter egg in every episode. These will change from time to time, so for season 1, why don't we go with Basketball Stanley? Boom. And it'll end up in next week's episode, which will be Diversity Day. So it's a contest. Answer the trivia first, spot out the Easter egg, and or leave the best emoji sequence summing up next week's episode, and you'll get your name in that field guide. And be warned, there's gonna be some spoilers for the series ahead. Okay, with that, let's get this one off the ground.
I understand nothing.
All right, in a modern world that's honestly full of Office podcast, reaction channels, books, blogs, and tons of other stuff, there's not a ton of stuff that's relatively unknown about the creation of The Office. So instead of me just spouting out things that we all know, let me point you to some great resources for that. It's like the Office Ladies podcast. It's done by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey. It won last year's greatest podcast of all time or something. There's Brian Baumgartner's podcast that's an oral history of The Office. I think he's got another one that just came out or is coming out. Both those podcasts have an extremely high production value and their guests are amazing. I kind of have an ADD issue, so podcasts are a little difficult for me to get through, so if written word is more your thing, then I can recommend Andy Green's Untold Story of the Greatest Show of the 2000s, or some crazy long title like that. It's great. I was actually last year able to interview Andy Green. He's an awesome writer. The book is really fun to read compared to what I thought it was going to be. Out of all the common stuff I see about season 1, there is an interesting topic that I do love reading about, listening to, and that's who almost got the parts of our favorite characters. And it's hard to imagine what the series would have been if any of these other actors were selected. So I just want to break it down for just a second. For the role of Dwight Schrute, we had the likes of Seth Rogen, Patton Oswalt, Matt Besser, Matt Price, and Jarrett Grode, up for the role against Rainn Wilson, who did famously attempt to get on as Michael Scott. So there's less for the role of Pam Beesly, but most famously, Katherine Hahn tried out for the role.
Trying to remind my boss that there is no Y in paper.
I wonder if that means that in a bizarro universe, Jenna Fisher's now in the MCU. Fisher was married to James Gunn at the time, so that could have been her in. Anyway, Jim Halpert, or Jim Nelson as the original casting call stated, had actors like Paul Rudd, Steve Zahn, Zach Orth, Josh Radnor, Ron Livingston, and Colin Hanks. And there's this great story of Krasinski waited in the audition room, and he started speaking up about hoping that the network didn't screw up The Office, as he loved the UK comedy, and didn't want to see just a cheap American knockoff, only to find out that the person he was talking to was Greg Daniels. But the longest to cast was Michael Scott. They really did like Bob Odenkirk, and we do get a glimpse of what that Michael Scott would have looked like real late in the series.
But Gangnam Style's great, isn't it?
Oh my God. He's Michael Scott.
Also for consideration was David Koechner. A Packer, Scott would have been really strange. But the casting memo had a buffet of different actors considered on some level for the role of Michael Scott. Each of these would have obviously changed the very fabric of the series itself, including people like Christopher Guest, John C. Reilly, Eugene Levy, Cedric the Entertainer, Rick Moranis, Dan Aykroyd, Matthew Broderick, Owen Wilson, Jason Lee, Steve Buscemi, Stanley Tucci, Jon Favreau, William H. Macy, Gary Cole, Hank Azaria, Robert Townsend, Jeff Garland, Stephen Colbert, Dave Foley, Mark McKinney, Richard Kind, Horatio Sands, Thomas Lennon, Dave Castanella, David Arquette, Andy Richter, Damon Jones, and Paul F. Tompkins, most of which they never really got past the discussion phase for. But they did have Louis C.K. come in and read for Michael Scott, and they even made offers to Paul Giamatti and Philip Seymour Hoffman. This was during the age where it was almost an impossibility to get a movie star to come down to television, as it was considered, and it was for the most part, a demotion of sorts. Today, that's not really a thing with these big budget, highly produced series, in which these creators are no longer tied to that 90 to 120 minute runtime to tell their stories. They get to tell the stories they want, how they want to tell it, and the budgets and the creativity attract the stars. But getting Steve Carell on board with this television show when they did was kismet. He had just had a minor but memorable role in Bruce Almighty. He was on the rise in the community, and NBC scooped him up at just the right time in his career. It's hard to imagine anyone else taking this role, and I'm sure you're gonna hear me gush about this a lot throughout the series, but Carell's character work is incredible, even in this episode.
Have you felt the vibe yet? We work hard, we play hard. Sometimes we play hard when we should be working hard, right?
While we don't get much backstory on who Michael Scott is or what his motives are,
I've been at Dunder Mifflin for 12 years, the last 4 as regional manager.
we could tell so much just by his body language. And these are all choices that Carell brings to this character. For example, look at Carell's eye work as he does this talking head.
I think that pretty much sums it up.
As he goes back and forth from the camera to the interviewer, almost as though he's seeking approval or validation for some wisdom or joke he dropped.
Okay, all right. See you later.
All right. Take care.
Seeking approval is a characteristic of Michael that persists through the entire series. But there are some traits of Michael that are just unique to season 1. And these differences are pretty evident on the surface, as Michael Scott, while not the only main character, is a spotlight and often the heart of the show. And this Michael that we get in season 1 is vastly different from the one that we see for the rest of the series. But I'm gonna get more into that when we get there in season 2. But there are some difficulties watching season 1 for series veterans. And one thing is feeling that something is not quite right about the set. It's similar, but it's not the same as the rest of the series. Obviously, these establishing shots are different. This shot is famously from an actual office building in Scranton. But for the pilot and the rest of season 1, they decided to film in a real office building. They didn't move to a soundstage until season 2. While this decision does give the feeling of a drab office environment, it impacts a lot of things like the lighting, which can make this feel really uncomfortable. And obviously the personnel over the first season and rolling into season 2 have some unfamiliar faces for the series. The idea being that the doc crew would focus on a few of the staff members who would make for an interesting story subjects, and the others would just be basic background characters, like fan favorite Creed, who fought to get himself on this show, and his work really paid off.
We're in the parking lot earlier, that's how I know you.
So after The Office was picked up and they ordered an additional 5 episodes, the casting directors were able to actually spend more time on fleshing out the cast, many of which actually included writers' room participants. But we're gonna get more into that in Diversity Day. For now, let's dive into the deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Cap.
We're gonna get more into this in the ratings, but the pilot episode of The Office is just a rehash of the British pilot.
She has left him, I forgot about that.
That was a woman I was talking to.
So going out on a limb, I'd suggest that the original series thesis is an attempt at commentary on the drab environments these business parts create, along with the bored humans that are forced to sit at their desk and waste their days away. Problems all compounded by having an incompetent and ineffectual boss.
I've been promoted, so every cloud.
Now I love the way that the US office wraps their messages into the writing without having a normal, you see, Timmy moment.
You know, son, some wild animals like squirrels and raccoons and rabbits can adjust to captivity. But a deer needs space.
Often these deeper meanings run through both disconnected plot lines to reinforce that message. And the message is open to interpretation, because they don't really have a PSA moment.
I guess you're right, Dad.
Well, Michael does sometimes.
At least we put this matter to bed. That's what she said. Or he said.
But the pilot, taking influence directly from the BBC hit, is merely a collection of loosely edited together footage from Ryan's first day. So I think what I'd rather do is share what I think the thesis is for the entire series, and that's gonna give you a sense of how I watch this show. It comes down to how life has these moments of insanity, drama, arguments, joy, sadness. While we remember the highlights and the bad times, the stuff that happens in between, that's life. And The Office looks at how people who are connected by friendship or just by proximity can have a sincere impact on each other. And the pilot reinforces that message perfectly with just a day in the life of random people at a paper company. Okay, so with that, let's rate this thing.
This is the worst.
Okay, so rating Office episodes. Let me explain how I look at this. I love this series, I really do. But loving something doesn't mean that you think it's flawless. When it comes to an episode, I think that deserves a low score. I'm gonna call it out as such. When it comes to an episode that is nonstop genius in every layer of production, I'm gonna call that out as such. So what I've decided is that I'm not gonna rate this episode, the pilot. It's not really fair to rate this one. And that's not a cop-out. I doubt that when NBC got the final tape of the pilot episode, they thought, this is the most genius thing I've ever seen in my life.
I'm Hitler!
Instead, they probably saw the potential of what they had, and while it wasn't lightning in a bottle yet, they probably thought just a few tweaks and it could be there. So I'm not gonna rate this episode as I compare all episodes of The Office against The Office as a whole, meaning that I grade on an Office curve. If I give an episode a 1 out of 5, that doesn't mean that episode is trash and I hate The Office. It just means that out of all The Office episodes, this one doesn't really measure. If I give an episode a 5 out of 5, it doesn't mean that I think that's the greatest work of art that humans have ever created. It just means that it's one of the highlights of The Office for me. If I didn't rate on this curve, then everything would be like IMDb ratings, which has almost everything as an 8 point something, which is fine, but you don't really get to see the range if I rate everything a 4.392 out of 5, which leads to the problem with rating the pilot. It's so different from the rest of the series. The editing's weird, Michael's weird, everything is kind of stale, the lighting, the acting, the characterization's all off, and that's to be expected for a pilot. They were creating something just out of nothing.
Just go along with it, okay? All right.
And I appreciate that. The thing is, when they fleshed out the rest of the first season, they had a structured approach to each episode, and that became the formula of how every episode from then on would be created for the rest of the series. And that just doesn't exist for this episode. So let me hear in the comments what you think about the pilot. Maybe share your favorite episode of the series, or how you started watching the series. And as I promised at the very beginning of this episode, this is the second time I reviewed season 1, and that's because my original content was a very different format. I didn't really know what I was doing, Creed was snoozing on the job most of the time,
Quabbity Ashwins.
and I just felt like I needed to do season 1 justice. So I'm gonna roll these out once a week for the next little while. If you're new to the channel, hop on over to our Discord. There's lots of Office fans, there's fans of this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey, and welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris, and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today, we're looking at Diversity Day.
Today is Diversity Day, and someone's gonna come in and talk to us about diversity. It's something that I've been pushing, that I've been wanting to push for a long time.
Diversity Day was written by BJ Novak and directed by Ken Kwapis. It originally aired on March 29th, 2005, was viewed by 6 million people, way down from the pilot's staggering 11.2 million, and currently has an 8.3 out of 10 on IMDb. And your Diversity Day trivia is, and this is probably a layup, who did Michael sign his form as?
He's gonna lose it when he reads that.
Answer the trivia first, spout out the Easter egg, and or leave the best emoji sequence summing up next week's episode, and you'll get your name in that field guide. Today we're gonna talk about some behind the scenes stuff. We're gonna look at the not so hard to identify deeper meaning, and talk about why in the world this episode ends up on so many people's top 10 lists. And be warned, there may be spoilers for the series ahead, and with that, let's get offended.
I understand nothing.
Right, so the first thing we have to talk about is what this episode means. Okay, not like that. I mean, what this episode did for the series. When the pilot episode dropped, the 11.2 million people who tuned in saw an Americanized rendering of the British version of The Office, with the same plot points, same tone, and many of the same jokes, just tweaked for American audiences. The initial reaction to the pilot's approach was relatively poor, as the British version of The Office was much beloved. And look, I've seen it now a few times. I don't really hold it in the same regard as many people seem to. In my opinion, it was beloved because of what it accomplished. Rather than it being the masterpiece of the small screen, to me the UK Office is much like the Diversity Day episode itself. It was groundbreaking. Gervais and Merchant were able to create this low-budget comedy series that was a spoof of several shows that already existed on BBC at the time. And if you don't know, which I didn't, apparently a trend in BBC shows at that time were these workplace docudramas in which a camera crew would follow people at a workplace, maybe 3 different businesses, for one episode, and an editor would just smash that all together to make this dry, mundane story. So initial viewers of the UK version of The Office weren't really clued in on whether or not David Brent was a real person or not. That whole premise elevates that series to something really unique, with Gervais even talking in an interview that after the first episode aired, he was on a bus and overheard 2 elderly ladies talking about his show. One of them saying that they didn't get why they would show such a quirky, weird boss, and Gervais knew that he was on the right track with that reaction. But when the US did the exact same thing, that element, it wasn't present, so the show just didn't work. We didn't have that trend in shows per se, at least nothing that would air on NBC's primetime sitcom lineup, so audiences who are familiar with the British version of The Office, they were underwhelmed, because it was a cheap American ripoff, not really my words. And those who were unfamiliar with the British version, well, they were also underwhelmed because it just wasn't that good. Those are my words. So then comes Diversity Day. Filmed 6 months after the pilot was shot, the studio had picked up an additional 5 episodes to round out a 6-episode season. And Daniel said they wanted to steer away from just redoing plot points to separate themselves from the UK Office, which I think was a great call. They decided to focus on race for Diversity Day, as it is never not relevant in American culture. And race is something that the UK Office never really got into, at least not immediately.
So the Queen goes, is it a black... Oh, yeah? Sorry, were you telling a joke? No, that was it. What did the Queen say?
So what I'd like to do is talk about some of the actors who made their first appearance in this episode. Larry Wilmore plays Mr. Brown.
Michael, I would love to have your permission to run this session. Can I have your permission?
Wilmore was a writer on the show and had zero intentions of actually playing a character, but he sat on the table read for Brown, and he got so many laughs from everyone that they had to include him. He does also appear again in Gay Witch Hunt, which does seem pretty fitting.
Okay, can we steer away from gay people?
Also acting first in this episode is our beloved HR rep, Toby Flenderson.
Hey, we're not all gonna sit in a circle Indian style, are we?
Get out.
Portrayed by seasoned writer Paul Lieberstein. Lieberstein also had no intention of acting, but as BJ Novak revealed in an interview, all the writers' room loved Paul's demeanor and desperately wanted him in the series. Michael Schur even mentioned that when Kevin Riley saw the dailies of this...
And lame. So double offensive. This is an environment of welcoming, and you should just get the hell out of here.
He practically demanded that we see more of that redhead guy in the show. And out of that one interaction became this ongoing epic battle of good and evil between Michael and Toby. This is also the first appearance of Kelly in the series too.
I have 2.
Nice.
White and Indian.
Who's also portrayed by one of the writers. A character who goes through some drastic changes over the next few seasons, but we're gonna get into that in a future episode. And the last new actor I wanna talk about is Meredith. And okay, I said actor because the character of Meredith was previously portrayed by this woman in the pilot, but in those 6 months between the pilot and Diversity Day, Allison Jones, the primary casting director, brought Kate Flannery in for the role of Meredith Palmer.
Lots of cultures eat rice. It doesn't help me.
And as far as structure goes, this episode ironed out the storytelling of The Office, with an interconnected A plot and B plot spliced in a semi-linear fashion. And that might not be worth noting, but the pilot is such a mess, I thought it'd be worth calling that out. Also at first, we see Dwight's weird grip on reality.
A hero kills people that wish him harm.
Okay.
A hero is part human and part supernatural. A hero is born out of a childhood trauma.
I love the ability of the writers to wave the line of what Dwight will really believe.
I don't believe you. Continue.
Also at first, Michael's love for cinematography.
But don't take my word for it. Let's take a look at the tape. But I'm also the founder of Diversity Tomorrow, because today is almost over.
Also seen first in Diversity Day, Michael going above and beyond to teach people a lesson.
Okay, Kevin, you can take off that thing, okay?
Obviously, he sees himself as some diversity warrior, giving himself the Martin Luther King Jr. card.
And I have a dream that you will really let the sparks fly.
There'll still be a social justice warrior with a Martin later in the series too.
That Martin here has had some trouble with the law. You show me a white man you trust, and I will show you a black man that I trust even more.
Another major thing from this episode is that this sequence...
I brought in some burritos or some colored greens or some pad thai. Love pad thai.
It's collard green.
Well, it was shot several different times in several different ways. Novak said that after each shot, they'd have this several-minute conversation discussing what each reaction from Krasinski meant and what they wanted it to mean. I love the attention to detail, and the cut that they went with was definitely iconic. Bringing the Jim Pam will they won't they to the forefront was a great move by Daniels, and something that was even recommended by Gervais. And that's all good, but for now, let's dive into the deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Kat.
Okay, having a pretty on-the-nose look at race for your second episode was a bold move by the showrunners.
This office, I think, is very advanced in terms of racial awareness.
And the humor in this episode can have a wide range of reactions from viewers. I thought the best way to break down this episode's deeper meaning is to look at those different reactions. So first, and I'll say probably in the minority, are those who would champion this episode as an excuse to make racist jokes and make fun of stereotypes or spout out racial slurs. Well, I have one clip to combat that.
Abraham Lincoln once said that if you're a racist, I will attack you with the North.
And it's not often that I'd say this, but if you believe that this episode is giving you ammo to make racist comments, you're just wrong. And, well, that's my opinion. It just doesn't matter. Opinions don't matter when the opinion is based on something that's empirically false. And this episode is impossible to watch as it exists and conclude that racism is okay.
Come on! Let's celebrate diversity, right?
Yes, exactly.
Anything beyond that, and you're just projecting.
That was great! She gets it! Now she knows what it's like to be a minority!
The next reaction that I'd say, and it's kind of close to the last one, are people who use this as ammo against modern day political correctness culture. And there probably is some overlap between this reaction and the racist crowd, but it's probably not the same. I say that because this episode does seem to be poking a little bit of fun at super heightened PC aware folks. For example, corporate brings in Mr. Brown to do the most boring presentation that I could imagine.
All you need are honesty, empathy, respect, and open-mindedness.
And this is just so real. I don't know if you've ever sat through one of these things before, but I have.
I do believe in that part of the pledge.
But why is Mr. Brown there in the first place?
Looking through the cards, I've noticed that many of you wrote down the same incident, which is ironic because it's the exact incident I was brought in here to respond to. Now, how many of you are familiar with the Chris Rock routine?
Well, obviously that. But is he there just to spread the joys of diversity?
It kind of expresses the joint experience we had today. I want you to look them over and sign them as kind of a group pledge.
Well, probably somewhat, but it's really just to get Michael to sign this piece of paper.
I don't think I can sign this.
I can't leave until you do.
And why?
What are you writing, Purple? Just preparing for the deposition.
Right, because in the US, it is illegal for a company to discriminate based on race, religion, sex, age, gender, disability, sexual orientation, and I maybe missed something and I'm sorry if I did. But Dunder Mifflin doesn't deal with this issue, then eventually they're gonna have a lawsuit on their hands. Right, so it's possible that there's criticism here that some companies may not even care about diversity as much as they care about not getting sued. But overall, I don't think we're supposed to take away PC culture is stupid. That doesn't seem to be the message.
Who am I supposed to be?
It's gonna percolate. No. Well, that was inadvertent. We didn't actually plan that.
The third reaction that I think people have to this episode is this is a cautionary tale against overreactions. Michael's reeling during this entire plot due to his Chris Rock routine. Michael is so convinced that he can right those wrongs that he takes matters into his own hands.
I just hated it when that guy was in here. Mr. Brown, if that was his real name.
And obviously this works for no one.
Get as much done as you can before lunch, because afterward, I'm going to have you all in tears.
And in the background, we get the idea of this overreaction theme being reinforced with the B plot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's actually another salesman here. Yeah, I can redo it if you want to do that. Oh, he gave you a discount? No, I don't blame you.
Call me dumb, but as many times as I've watched this episode, I'm not really sure I ever connected that Dwight stole the sale from Jim as retribution for his shredder nonsense.
Thanks, Dwight.
Retaliation. Tit for tit.
Shredder nonsense. Where's my Ninja Turtles t-shirt? Whatever, I couldn't find it. Anyway, the point here is, in an attempt to right his wrongs, or at very least compensate for a misinterpretation, Michael ends up alienating people he only wants to make feel secure.
I have a customer meeting.
Yeah, well, if you leave, we'll only have 2 left. Yes. Enjoy. Absolutely. Namaste.
And security is what we're expecting in our social circles, whether at work or in our pods. It's a new word for me. It's why I'm convinced that Pam rests her head on Jim. In this circle of chaos around all of them, Pam finds some security in her friend Jim, and Jim finds some solace in knowing that he can provide that for her.
Not a bad day.
And in speaking of overreacting, there's probably something to say here about overreaction of wanting to censor this episode for its offensive content, but it seems to be quieted down now as far as I can tell from when I'm filming this, so who knows. It's interesting though, I read in an interview that Daniels was so worried about the uncensored Chris Rock bit getting out ahead of the show without any context that he literally ran to the editing room and bleeped it out on the master.
He's butchering it. Could you just let me, every time?
Meaning that there are no copies of the uncensored version out there. And look, this is all opinion stuff. My opinion is that we should use logic as our guide here. And when reading this episode, you might question, what is the joke? Is it that racism is funny?
Let me ask you, is there a term besides Mexican that you prefer? Something less offensive?
Or is it using that humor to comment on the stupidity of racism?
You want to get high?
No.
I think you do, Mon.
Stop.
Okay, all right, no. All right, that's good.
This episode invokes the name of 2 comedians during its 22-minute runtime.
Now, how many of you are familiar with the Chris Rock routine?
What are you watching?
Chappelle Show.
Really?
Yeah.
Both Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle made names for themselves in the 90s and early 2000s as prolific comedians whose routines and sketches would often center around race issues, which wasn't new at the time, and it's still a thing now. And in my opinion, one of the most thought-provoking questions this episode asks is, what makes something racist?
And then I go and do the exact same routine, same comedic timing, and people file a complaint to corporate. Is it because I'm white and Chris is black?
Well, that question's kind of a joke, but it's not resolved. It just lingers out there, leading to what I assume was a commercial break, leaving the viewers to ponder Michael's question and think for ourselves what makes something inherently discriminatory or racist. That's the real question of the day. But there are better people than me to answer that question.
Where's my Oprah moment?
I'm just reviewing episodes of The Office. So the question I want to dissect is this episode actually good?
This is the worst.
Frequently making top 10 lists of the best episodes of The Office, Diversity Day seems to be heralded as one of the greatest. Beyond that, it was nominated for the Writers Guild of America Award for Best Episodic Comedy. And just real talk time, one of the reasons I wanted to redo my season 1 content is that I had this thought in the back of my head, and it just kept saying to me, maybe you just don't get it.
Man, I should have gotten some food.
So I've spent the last year reviewing episodes of The Office, and I came back mostly for this one episode. Because I want to be cool, I want to be in the crowd, I want to be one of those people that would put this on my top 10 list. But I'm just not sure this episode is as good as it could be. Let me break it down for you. They start with a hot button topic. In this case, it's casual racism. Michael's a culprit of offending someone. Michael tries to make it right with corporate, but still insists his way is better. Then he crosses the line in an attempt to show how woke he is. Okay, so call me basic, but I think that Gay Witch Hunt literally did that exact same premise so much better.
I call everybody faggy. Why would anyone find that offensive?
He's attracted to other men.
Okay. And you can tell me how you do that to another dude.
Your immaturity is extremely disappointing and may even lead to a lawsuit, which is the absolute last thing this company needs right now.
Oscar, why don't you take this opportunity to officially come out to everybody here, however you want to do it.
It's a fine line to try to present a relatable Michael Scott, who is both the source of the cringe, yet somehow still lovable. And I get that's not what they were going for right now, but juxtaposing future Michael against the abomination that we see in Diversity Day is like swapping out your bowl of delicious cereal with dry rocks. Look, Diversity Day, along with the rest of season 1, has 2 sets of pretty large shoes to fill. First, it has to measure up against the much beloved original version of The Office. But the other set of shoes that we measure Diversity Day against is what The Office became. On the night it aired, only 6 million people watched this episode. It wasn't until season 2, with a renewed vigor from NBC and an overhaul of the show and the very character of Michael Scott, that the ratings went up, meaning that a lot of people, me included, had never seen Diversity Day until it streamed years later, or they got the DVDs. Thus, a bias was created by watching future episodes of The Office before watching this one. And so look, going back, revisiting this, I'm gonna say it's honestly good for what it was. This episode has so much going for it.
Oh man, am I a woman?
But that doesn't mean that what came later didn't change our perspectives. It's kind of like having a favorite dish your mom made when you were growing up. For me, it was chili.
Probably the thing I do best.
I wouldn't touch a bowl of chili at any of my friends' house ever. And that was until I got married and my wife decided to make her chili for me for the first time. I was like, babe, you got some big shoes to fill. My mama's chili is the best chili. Don't tell this to my mom, but my wife's chili was so much better. It was amazing.
Trick is to undercook the onions.
Look, acknowledging my wife's chili is better than my mom's doesn't undervalue my mom's chili, and I can appreciate it for what it was. But my perception of what is good was clearly impacted by what I experienced later. And I think the same goes for The Office. And I don't think I'm really alone here. As I alluded earlier, the IMDb scores are generally a good way to understand the general fandom's sentiments on this episode. Bad episodes of The Office are somewhere in the 7 to 8 range. A good episode is anywhere from 8 to 8.5, and a great episode go up from there. And Diversity Day sits right here. And then I wondered if that was because this episode is problematic. But it actually is well below other problematic episodes like Gay Witch Hunt, Women's Appreciation, and other generally offensive episodes. So I think the best conclusion as to why this ends up on so many people's top 10 list is for what I said earlier. To me, the UK Office is much like the Diversity Day episode itself. It was groundbreaking. Diversity Day was groundbreaking, as it essentially created the template for what this series was going to be for the rest of its runtime. While the variables change, the recipe stays the same. As such, I think it deserves to be on the list of the most iconic episodes of The Office. While it's not the best, it is a bold look at social issues in a pretty comedic way. But what do I rate this episode? That's the real question. Having gone through that entire thing, I'm gonna rate Diversity Day a 4 out of 5. As soon as the second half of this episode hits, around this moment,
All right, everybody pretty? Come on, here we go.
It becomes iconic, shockingly memorable, and we get an early feel for what a killing field in The Office would be like. It sets the pace for the rest of the show, and it explores a taboo topic, and it really sells me on this Jim Pam thing. I wouldn't put this in my list of top 10 episodes of The Office. I just wouldn't. But it's good in its own right. But that's just what I think about Diversity Day. What are your thoughts? I want to hear from you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey, and welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris. I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today we're looking at healthcare.
Have you seen it?
No, I have a life.
Interesting. What's that like?
Healthcare was written by Paul Lieberstein and directed by Ken Whittingham. It originally aired on April 5th, 2005, was viewed by 5.8 million people, and currently has a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb. And for healthcare, I'm not gonna do a normal trivia. Instead, I want you to comment your own made-up ailment that you want covered under Dwight's plan.
Government-created killer nanorobot infection.
Answer that question, spout out the Easter egg, and leave the best emoji sequence summing up next week's episode, and you'll get your name in that video. Today we're gonna talk about some improvised diseases, some slick camera work, and probably a little bit about the silence. And be warned, there may be spoilers ahead. With that, let's get awkward.
I understand nothing.
Okay, and I know this has nothing to do with this episode per se, but what's the deal with this giant framed poster behind Pam's desk? I have so many questions, like, why is this framed? Why is it so big? Is breakfast really gonna be served? What kind of breakfast is gonna be served? Where is this gonna be served at? Is this an annual thing? It's missing a date. How is everyone supposed to know when this is? Why is it still hanging on the wall, at least in season 5? Okay, but par for the course for season 1 field guides, we're gonna talk about some firsts. First up is one of Michael's favorite things to do ever, and that's references and citations.
I'm Mark from Mark.
Whose line is it anyway is also referenced.
This is my world. This is improv. This is whose line is it anyway?
That establishes Michael's love for improv.
Talk! Just talk! Shut up!
But it also makes us wonder why he doesn't recognize Josh from Stanford as...
Your Majesty?
There's a very meta reference here.
You should try it sometime.
Wow. But then who would watch my TV?
More of Michael going down a rabbit hole.
Does that make me their doctor? Yes.
Dwight's dictatorial approach is first seen here.
You have forfeited that privilege. I have tried to treat you all as adults, but obviously I am the only adult here. Number 1, inverted penis.
And there are a few great early examples of how The Office will leverage the cameraman, not only as a character in the series, but how also the cinematography tells the story. First we have this shot, and it begins with this focus on Pam answering the phone. Then the cameraman is tasked to find a shot of Michael. And I'm sure this was planned out, but it's still impressive that they could find this shot of Carell through the blinds. Then we go back to Pam, and eventually back to Michael. The action of the cameraman finding the focus points in this series is one of the most engaging things throughout. Another good example of this is when Jim is in Michael's office. The camera's focused on Michael in a tight shot. Michael says he's too busy. The camera glances down at Michael's inbound folder thing, which contains only a post-it note inferring that he's obviously not busy at all.
He wasn't inferring, he was implying. You were inferring.
Then the camera glances up to Jim, noticing the same thing that we just noticed. Which Jim's response focuses us back over to Michael.
I really think I should be concentrating on sales.
Really?
Yeah.
We know that Michael's lying about being busy, but this simple camera trajectory adds a whole nother level to the joke, especially when it could have looked like this.
Assistant to the regional manager.
Same thing.
No, it's not.
And there are a few interesting background details in this episode, like Creed Bratton is the voice of the elevator operator.
Well, it goes 300 feet into the earth, but it moves really slowly.
So it's not a free fall.
It's an industrial coal elevator.
Which would make that his first real speaking lines in the series. Although he can be heard in Diversity Day, and there's some debate about that.
Oh, this is a good one.
And one of my favorite things about this episode is that this entire sequence was improvised by Rainn Wilson.
All right, who did this? I'm not mad. I just want to know who did it so I can punish them. Government-created killer nanorobot infection.
And you can spot Angela and Brian breaking character. I personally love Count Chocolitis.
Count Chocolitis.
Sounds tough.
But dentro-hydroplosion is pretty good too.
Let's say that my teeth turn to liquid and then they drip down the back of my throat. What'd you call that?
That's spontaneous dentohydroplosion.
With that, let's dive into the deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Kevin.
Health issues are amongst some of the most taboo topics in the office place, along with religion, politics, race, and money.
Are you having money problems?
Monkey problems? No, I'm not having monkey problems.
It seems that real early on, the office wanted to make it really clear that they wanted to explore these topics, using Michael, proxy Dwight in this case, to explore those issues.
I thought your vagina was removed during your hysterectomy.
But if cringe is what they were going for, the act of forcing employees to divulge their health issues in a public setting is so uncomfortable.
Okay, great. Dermatitis. Thank you, Angela. I'll make sure that's covered.
And that uncomfortable seed is planted here.
The uterus is different from a vagina. I still have a vagina.
Watered here.
Who wrote this hysterical one? Anal fissures.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, but no one here has it.
But the granddaddy of cringe in this episode is this unbroken silence.
Someone has it.
The original script that Lieberstein wrote for this included 2.5 minutes of complete unbroken silence. But the studio pushed back and they edited around it. I think the end result still conveyed that meaning. And what's that again?
Healthcare.
Right, healthcare. Healthcare is a benefit that some folks can get as a perk of being employed with a company. If you don't know, it basically helps you pay for your medical visits, procedures, emergencies, all of that, which get pretty expensive here in the States.
Because someone in this office is coming up with all this ridiculous stuff.
While not as direct, cutting healthcare to a cheaper plan is like lowering an employee's wages.
It's like a pay decrease.
Michael knows how unpopular this is going to be, so he looks to have a scapegoat take the fall for him.
Oh, come on! That's horrible! Oh. Thanks, Dwight, for a crappy plan. Ah, damn!
All of this leads to Dwight's great monologue about healthcare in nature.
In the wild, healthcare is, I hurt my leg, I can't run. The lion eats me, and I'm dead. I'm the lion. You're dead.
I love Dwight's outlook on things, but it is a reminder at this point in the series, what they're going for is this look at how humans cope with this modern world.
Hey, everybody! Ice cream sandwiches! Ah!
Okay, so in a capitalistic society, we often correlate concepts to the animal kingdom.
Does the tiger fire the monkey? Does the tiger transfer the monkey to another branch? Pun.
And that's that the bottom line is always going to take priority above everything else. It is interesting, though, the difference that we see in Michael. He's pretty aware that this is going to be an unpopular decision, but he's not seemingly concerned about his employees getting the best health coverage. Instead, he's worried about how he's going to look.
Doesn't matter. The point is, they're not unhappy anymore. They're out there thinking, wow, my boss really cares about me. He has a surprise. He's cool.
From corporate's point of view, they could just downsize and close the branch, but instead, they're trying to keep the branch alive, but just reduce cost. And this is where things get nuanced. However you look at it, there's a sense of hypocrisy or at least doublespeak. The company cares about their employees, but they have to cut corners, which will negatively impact their employees. But they cut those corners in order to save those employees from even worse consequences.
Downsizing?
There's no downsizing.
But it's up to businesses to make those tough decisions, and a lot of corporations actually appoint external consultants to do the heavy lifting of the unpopular work. See Office Space for more on that topic.
Oh, hi, Bob. Bob?
And this episode, I think, also comments on how businesses use distractions to get people to stop focusing on cutbacks and real-world problems with things like parties, minor awards, and whatever else your company may do to keep morale boosted.
It's a trip to Gettysburg.
That sounds super inspiring. I'm in.
Perhaps the best thing that we can squeeze from this episode is that we remember that our workplace is in the business of making money. It's not really a family. Our bosses are rarely our friends. When push comes to shove, what needs to be cut will be cut, whether it's our healthcare, our perks, our job. Man, season 1 is so fun, but the best case scenario that we can all have is find a job that you can be happy with your work, and if you work for someone else, have a healthy sense of paranoia about how your company is looking out for your best interest. But with that, let's rate this thing.
This is the worst! Drum roll!
All right, let's get this out of the way. I'm giving this one a 2 out of 5.
It's a suicide mission, you know?
Stick with me. For the same reason I didn't really give the pilot a solid rating is the same reason I hate rating healthcare.
Oh, it's awful.
Diversity Day was unique, but put that on hold for a second. Healthcare is slow and methodical. It's got some amazing cringe-filled moments, and you can tell that they're finding their footing and figuring out what to do with it along the way. But better than anything in season 3, season 4, season 5, I mean, taking the lowest rated of those seasons, there's literally no way this episode holds a candle. So just to reiterate on my ratings, 2 out of 5 doesn't mean that I think this episode is just trash. I'm just grading on an office curve. Diversity Day does get a pass because of how incredibly charged and iconic it was. Healthcare, on the other hand, it's not the worst episode of The Office. That one's coming up soon. But it's not very good. I don't enjoy this one. Every time it comes on, I sigh, and it's not a lot of fun. There are some great iconic moments, and there are great memes that come from this one.
It's not going to be a popular
What's your
decision
job?
around the old orifice.
But overall, I just don't like this one. 2 out of 5 is what it's getting. But that's just what I think about healthcare. I know some season 1 apologist is gonna hop on here and tell me why I'm wrong. Please, please do so. I keep asking people to tell me what they see in this season, and it always comes down to this kind of intangible je ne sais quoi that makes it amazing and right. I mean, we're all entitled to our opinions. I'm not here to tell anybody that they're wrong. I'm just saying what I think about this episode. Thank you so much, guys, for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey, and welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris, and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today we're looking at The Alliance.
Do you want to form an alliance with me?
Absolutely, I do.
Good, good, excellent.
The Alliance is the 4th episode of The Office. It was written by Michael Schur and directed by Brian Gordon. And your Alliance trivia is, what job does Jim say Meredith has? And what is her real job? Answer the trivia first, spout out the Easter egg, and or leave the best emoji sequence summing up next week's episode, and you'll get your name in that field guide. Today we're going to talk about the first appearance of someone who's going to stay with us for all 9 seasons. We're going to talk about this guy for a minute.
Donald Trump.
And a breakdown of the alliances forged and what they mean. And so be warned, there may be spoilers for the series ahead. And with that, let's shake down the competition.
I understand nothing.
This feels like a cold opening, right?
Michael! Oh, God! Dwight, come on! I wanted to talk to you about the downsizing.
I think I can make it one.
Do I need to be worried?
Maybe.
Breathe it in. The Alliance is actually starting to get all the ingredients together to make a real episode of The Office.
What? What the hell going on here?
I mean, we still have some missteps, like Pam isn't generally this sassy.
By saying that, she was gambling that I wouldn't smack her.
And I'll get into that in the ratings, but I do have some first in this one. Like the first mention of the Dundies.
What do you know about Meredith?
Employer Dunder Mifflin Paper Incorporated. Awards, multiple Dundies.
Those are the first time that we go down to the warehouse. The first time we see Craig Robinson portraying Daryl. I read that Daniel sought after Robinson because he'd seen a funny video that Robinson made. I couldn't really find out what video it was. It was a music video, so if you know it, leave it in the comments and I'll pin it. I do know that Robinson is obviously a natural performer. Before he went onto the stage, he was teaching music and started taking improv classes at Second City in Chicago. The Office spurred Robinson's career forward, but I'd say outside The Office, I mostly know him as
The Pontiac Bandit foiled at last. Hey. Wow, you guys, thank you very much.
All right, and back to first in this one. This is the first in a long line of birthday parties we'll see in The Office.
Whoa, cat! All right.
Happy birthday to you.
It is your birthday period.
Statement of fact.
That's a pretty lame party.
Now all I like is baklava.
The staff newsletter is shown here for the first time.
Pulled off an amazing 80s party last year.
Off the hook. We're gonna hear about this years later.
Group photo for the newsletter.
You gotta be kidding.
I love the little details inside this newsletter though. Thinking through all the work that had to go into this 2 to 3 second bit is really impressive. Also, the text is nonsense. My favorite part is, in fact, at times we can probably get away with not using real English words such as, and I'm not even gonna try to pronounce those.
Come on!
This may be a loose piece of foreshadowing to the branch wars.
I have just convinced Dwight that he needs to go to Stanford and spy on our other branch.
Absolutely I Do is a thing in this show.
Absolutely I do. Good.
I learned from Jim. If Dwight ever asks you if you accept something secret, you reply, absolutely I do.
Michael's future unobtainable generosity is first shown here.
I'm always good for some serious buckage. Wow, $2, $3?
Per mile.
Per mile, yes.
Last year he walked 18 miles.
Son of a bitch. That is impressive.
And that's $450. And I can't help but feel a little bad for Michael here. I'll get into that in just a minute, but he's clearly not understanding what his pledge is, or at very least, Oscar should know he's being uncharacteristically charitable.
I've made some empty promises in my life, but Hands down, that was the most generous.
But when he tries to correct it just a couple hours later, Oscar gives him a really hard time about it.
It's however many dollars per mile.
Got it. Yes, so it does.
I just think it's kind of cheap to undonate money to a charity.
No.
So I don't know if Oscar's point is spot on, especially since the series explores this idea later with really reneging on a donation.
Has it really been 10 years?
Okay, and there's a lot of background information about this box that's been discussed by the Office Ladies podcast, for example. All of it's pretty great. But what I want to know is what's up with this fake rat?
Do I have a choice? No. Frankly, I don't. Will I trust Jim?
I mean, that had to be on purpose, right? What does the rat represent? Probably nothing. Let's go to the deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Kevin.
So just like Diversity Day name dropped a couple of comedians that would frame up how we're supposed to read that episode, The Alliance does the exact same thing. Both Survivor...
An alliance?
Oh, yeah.
What does that even mean?
I think it has something to do with Survivor, but I'm not sure.
And Apprentice.
I think the main difference between me and Donald Trump is that I get no pleasure out of saying the words, "you're fired." You're fired.
Are referenced during this episode. According to Wikipedia, because I'm way too lazy to write my own synopsis for the show, Survivor places a group of strangers in an isolated location where they must provide food, fire, and shelter for themselves. Contestants compete in challenges for rewards and immunity from elimination. The contestants are progressively eliminated from the game as they are voted out by their fellow contestants until only one remains and is given the title of sole survivor.
One day, 14 strangers who work together, but only one survivor. What?
And is also given a grand prize of $1 million.
$1 million!
The show originally aired in May of 2000 and it ended in... It's actually still on. 38 seasons later, and I've literally never watched one episode. Also though, fun fact, a few Office people did work on Survivor. The Apprentice, on the other hand, and again I quote, aspiring but otherwise unknown business persons and later celebrities would vie for the show's prize, a one-year $250,000 starting contract to promote one of Donald Trump's properties. Right, so I'm gonna have some young people who's gonna see this. Before Trump moved into the political realm, he used to have a crazy popular reality show in which he taught business people principles about business or something. His catchphrase was, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired.
You're fired. Get out of here.
Either way, both of those shows actually pit people against each other while having them work towards the same end. I can't get into those types of shows normally though, for a variety of reasons, but I get it. I get why we as a society watch those things, why Survivor's been on for 38 seasons.
I think an alliance might be a good idea. You know, help each other out. We need to figure out who's vulnerable and who's protected.
Talking head interviews in those shows are a way to add additional context to why people do what they do. Like an author narrating the inner thoughts of a character, we get a deeper understanding of the motives of these contestants. We get that in The Office too.
I mean, everything Dwight does annoys me. And I spend hours thinking of ways to get back at him, but only in ways that would get me arrested.
But, and I want to say this is the only time we actually hear the phrase "at that moment" in an Office talking head.
At that moment, I was just so happy.
As though the documentary interviewer just asked Jim what he was thinking about at that moment. Either way, when we break this episode down between the two plots, we get the feeling that people are generally not to be trusted, and that even if you find someone you can ally with, it just may not work out.
Him to drive to Connecticut and put peroxide in his hair.
What the hell is this? What are you trying to cop a feel or something,
No,
Hopper?
dude, no. Dude, I was just...
We again see Michael play the part of the company and the main antagonist of the general happiness of The Office.
Let's hope the only downsizing that happens to you is that someone downsizes your age.
While his intentions seem to be pretty good on the surface,
Get set for Operation Morale Improvement,
in general, they're pretty self-serving.
starring Michael Scott.
Sometimes our authority figures then are not people that we're supposed to ally with.
We are going to turn Secret Santa into Yankee Swap.
He's not supposed to just spring things on us out of nowhere.
Because quite often, the bus rolls downhill.
Because then you won't be able to plan your stupid tacky parties anymore. So you move the tree.
Well, if our authority isn't someone that we should ally with, what about our peers?
So listen, I was thinking that it might be a good idea if you and I formed an alliance.
And the episode explores that with the Jim-Dwight alliance. And just like any relationship, we have to look at that from both sides. From one side, Dwight somehow thinks that The Office Place will play out like a reality Survivor Apprentice type show. Even believing Jim when he says,
"You are not going to believe this."
What? I believe it.
Toby and Kevin, they're trying to get Angela kicked off.
Kicked off what? For real, Jim plays directly into Dwight's delusion, and I love it.
Damn it.
And for years after watching this episode, I actually thought Dwight realized at some point that Jim was pranking him.
We've just been messing with him because of the whole alliance thing.
An alliance? What the hell is he talking about?
I have absolutely no idea.
Only to realize that Dwight's monologue in the end means that he threw Jim under the bus simply because he saw an opportunity to ally himself with someone stronger.
That's the game. Convince him we're in an alliance, get some information, throw him to the wolves. That's politics, baby. Get what you can out of someone, then crush them.
And Jim's side's not that hard to understand. He's just messing with Dwight.
There may be chatting and giggling.
Go upstairs to the party so people don't notice that we're both gone.
Right. I told him that he should dye his hair to go undercover.
When we look at this alliance, it was built to fail in the first place because neither side was truly committed to it in the first place.
Let's keep this alliance totally a secret.
An alliance?
Oh, yeah.
What does that even mean?
And if these alliances are metaphors for relationships in our lives, then it's pretty easy to see the messages that if we go into a relationship ready to jump ship or not committed in the first place, they're bound to fall apart at the first sign of trouble. But taking that a bit further, we get to see a heavier message about how relationships sometimes just can't happen. Jim catches himself gushing on camera.
That was beautiful. All her idea, too. Awesome. She's so great.
But then he continues to ally himself with someone who can't fully commit to their alliance. The problem is they're so obviously meant for each other. Compare Pam in Michael's office. She's sad and she's voiceless.
You still want to have a party?
Yeah, why not? Sure. Go ahead, live a little. Come on, Pam. Come on, shake it up, shake it in.
Compare Pam in the party planning committee. She's bored out of her mind.
Blue, yellow, red.
And now compare Pam allied with Jim.
I know that it involves spying on people.
Clearly much more confident, a fully alive Pam. And the same actually works for Jim if you look at him over the last couple episodes. The alliance then ends by making it clear that the alliance between Jim and Pam, as natural, as good as it is, it just can't happen. And neither really should it, because, you know, she's already in an alliance.
In his ear. What the hell is this? What, are you trying to cop a feel or something,
No,
Hopper?
dude, no. Dude, no.
And betrayal is bad, see? That's... All of this to say is that there will always be people and powers that are present in our lives, and we have a choice on whether or not we ally with them or we keep our distance. We have to go into any alliance very carefully though, because everyone's only out to look out for themselves. But if you find that person who will continue to have your back, even when things get tough, that's the kind of alliance you want to stay in. But with that, let's rate this thing.
This is the worst.
Okay, season 1. Let's talk about the positives here. Like I said, we're starting to get the Office formula down. Jim's prank on Dwight is exemplary of their relationship and how it's going to be for years to come. Dwight taking something really seriously, Jim not taking that thing seriously, and then they play off each other in this really interesting dynamic.
In the warehouse during Meredith's birthday.
Oh my God, we have to be there.
I know, but it's gonna be a little tough because there's no good place to hide.
No, yes, there is.
And it honestly is a lot of fun. The Jim Pam drama is dialed up in this episode as well. Also, the stinger at the end is pretty great. So the negatives, this episode is slow.
Is Oscar around?
The roots of the UK office are showing through here, and I get it. That's what they were going for. I'm just not a fan. And you know who else wasn't? The millions of people the show was losing every week.
Oh, surprise!
I will admit that some of the show's methodical scenes do have a decent payoff. But decent is the key word there. Some of the cutaway gags are both effective, but awkward when taking the series as a whole.
Did you get your tickets?
To what?
The gun show?
So all up against every episode of The Office, I give this one a 2 out of 5. It's alright, but it is a step in the right direction.
I have absolutely no idea.
But that's just what I think about the Alliance. What are your thoughts? Leave it in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say. And don't forget about the comment contest, the emoji sequence for next week's episode, which is basketball. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey, and welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris, and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today, we're looking at basketball.
What? You gotta be kidding me!
Basketball was written and directed by showrunner Greg Daniels. It originally aired on April 19th, 2005, and was viewed by 5 million people, and currently has an 8.4. Okay, we're gonna get more on that 8.4 later. And your basketball trivia is, what NBA legend does Roy call Jim? Answer the trivia first, spot out the Easter egg, and he might be kind of hard to find in this episode. It's gotta be the small Stanley, not when I show this clip. And don't forget to leave the best emoji sequence summing up next week's episode, and you'll get your name in that field guide. Today, we're gonna be diving into the heart of competition.
Oh, how much does it hurt? How much does it hurt?
Look at some interesting writing.
It's just boom, boom, boom.
And I'm gonna confess my real feelings about this episode.
That's so nice.
And be warned, there's gonna be some serious spoilers ahead.
Warning! 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 Warning!
And with that, let's get to this tip-off.
Tip it my way, you're sleeping in the car.
Stanley!
I understand nothing.
Okay, basketball, there really isn't another episode like basketball. It's still in season 1 zone of production writing, yet it really starts breaking through to find its own hard-hitting humor.
I'll do it.
Oh, yuck. That's worse than you playing.
Famously, the idea of this one was born out of a deleted scene from the pilot episode, one that I'm not really sure has ever seen the light of day, correct me if I'm wrong. So let me give you some context about my journey with this episode, so you know where I'm coming from. I didn't start watching The Office until sometime in season 3, though I did have friends who became obsessed with it along the way. When I went back to rewatch season 1, especially this episode, Michael just rubbed me so wrong that I began to have a distaste and a near hatred for Michael Scott from this episode. Mostly because I've known Michael Scott's back in the day, and because I think I overly empathize with everyone who falls victim to Michael's issues.
Game over, game over, game over. That is it. I'm sorry.
So this time, I forced myself to watch this episode with new, unbiased eyes, as much as that's actually possible. And I'll say this, I don't hate it anymore.
I just don't like it at all, and it's terrible.
Saying a lot there, Chris. There is even a moment in the end of this episode where Michael almost completely redeems himself.
Screw corporate. Nobody's coming in tomorrow. You have the day off. Like, coming in an extra day is gonna prevent us from being downsized. Have a good weekend.
And we get a glimpse of what the series is headed for in the future. But for now, there's surprisingly a lot to enjoy in this episode. First, during the first months of the pandemic last year, The Ringer made a video breaking down this game in their patented basketball analysis style. It's pretty great. I'll put the link in the description. Also famously, the basketball game was almost entirely improvised, meaning that they had the cast play basketball for 2 straight days of shooting. And then tasked some poor editor, probably David Rogers, but I'm not entirely sure, to make a narrative out of this. I love editing, I really do. I'm pretty sure I'd be up to the task for this, but it's so much work. Putting this whole thing would be like getting handed 17 different jigsaw puzzles and being told, make something out of this.
Get to work.
I can't because there's no clue.
The puzzle is the clue.
While much of this game was improvised, there were certain events that were scripted, like the jump ball, Michael's free throw,
Oh, come on! What is wrong with me today?
Roy hitting Jim in the mouth,
Whoa, 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 whoa! Foul! Naked aggression!
which that one was scripted, but that specific hit, that wasn't planned, but they just went with it.
That was not scripted.
And the final outcome of the game was also planned.
Whoever was ahead won.
That was you.
It was us, really? I didn't know.
I could tell that in a lot of ways, the showrunners probably looked back on this episode with fondness. They paid homage to it in Michael's last episode.
Flippity flip!
Really?
And speaking of the cinematography, I can't tell if I like this shot or not. It's definitely unique to the series, and I think it's a clever way to show a divide by framing this object in the middle. And we never really did find out what happened in that pickup basketball game either.
When I let him come to my
I
pickup game,
apologize for that.
I vouch for you.
Michael,
I vouch for you in front of Todd Packer, Dwight.
Also, Dwight's game time introduction is extremely well done.
Okay, we'll be skins.
Come on, Dwight.
What? Should I on or off?
On, just put it on.
And he does explain who this chick is in the next episode in a deleted scene.
She's also a survivor of monster rape.
I also love all the random Scranton stuff all over the office. Jim mentions a local place, and it's even on his t-shirt. And Michael's still assigning out crap jobs to Dwight for scapegoat reasons.
They're trying to make me an scapegoat.
And I think it's safe to say that Greg Daniels and or Michael Schur hate jazz.
Basketball is like jazz, you know? You're kind of it's all downbeat, it's in the pocket. It's like,
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Kevin.
This episode does an interesting thing though, when it looks at the role of distractions like sporting events and how they keep us distracted from the problems of real life, like the great coliseums of the past.
tanks.
We all have problems, right? They probably don't look the same. Maybe dog barks too much. Maybe neighbors are too loud. You can't get the love of your life to break up with her fiance. You work with this guy.
Yeah! Give me your face! Yeah, huh? You know what?
And for this guy.
In your face!
I honestly don't know how you can work with that jackass. And that other jackass and that new jackass.
He's talking about Michael, Dwight, and Andy.
Oh yeah, I understood.
And when we liken Michael to a Caesar,
I am in his gay
who created the games for distractions and for loyalty. Thought being that if you could get your subjects' heads out of their day-to-day life full of hardships and troubles, most of the time caused from you, yourself, you could potentially be saving yourself from a future uprising. And there was a lot more that went into those kind of games at the Coliseums and stuff, but the idea of athletic feats of strength and competition have persisted and are almost in every culture known to man. There's just something about showing off what you can do that we humans can't get enough of. So once again, in season 1, we just get a look at the modern office, in which most of our days are spent sat down at a computer, full of corporate nonsense, and a healthy dose of seasonal depression on top of that.
Seasonal affective disorder, AKA SAD. That sounds like a very real thing, Toby.
It is real. Thank you for saying that.
And you have the very reason why I believe professional sports are so popular around the world. I mean, here in the States, the Super Bowl is the most watched televised event of the year. And in other parts of the world, you guys like a sport where they kick a ball around for an hour and a half.
Oh my God! Oh.
And the point is, the competitions, they don't really matter. And we all know it. Barring some athletes, owners, staff, and maybe some sports betting folks, we're all just gonna wake up the next day after the competition to little to no change. Cities who win major competitions throw these giant parades and celebrate their athletes through the streets. Why? Because distraction. Distractions can be a good thing. Like I said, watching your favorite YouTuber instead of doing your homework? Yeah. I hope you're doing that now. Finish this video first and, maybe do your homework. Distractions in those cases can be a good thing because you can clear your head, it gives you time to unwind, and you can think clearly. There's definitely something about burning energy that can be cathartic too.
Oh, how much does it hurt? How much does it hurt?
But distractions can be a dangerous thing too. Sometimes life is hard to deal with, and instead of dealing with life, we just focus on other things. The problem is, our problems don't disappear while we're distracted. Jim's still not with Pam.
Yeah, let's get you into a tub.
Yeah, let's get you in a tub.
And no fancy basketballing's gonna fix that. Michael's still gonna have to downsize at some point.
I'm gonna kill myself!
And now his staff is going to have to come in on a Saturday.
Like coming in an extra day is gonna prevent us from being downsized. Have a good weekend.
The best thing we seem to be able to do in life is take the distractions when it makes sense and buckle down and do the hard stuff when it makes sense. Too much of either is probably not a good thing. But with that, let's rate this thing.
This is the worst.
You know, it's weird. I have friends, multiple friends actually, who recently told me that this episode, in your face! This episode is their favorite episode of the entire series. The entire series.
That the best thing? Really? Gugh.
Normally, I have a pretty firm grasp on an episode, why I like it, why I don't like it, and then I just run with it. But something about the 5,200 people on IMDb who rated this an average of 8.4, the fact that the show itself calls back to the basketball episode several times, and the overall sentiments that I've had from the Office fandom around me, I had to give basketball another shot.
Dwight, I was open.
As I alluded to earlier, I wasn't a fan of this episode at all. And in some ways, this is a bizarro, weird look at what The Office might have been if that change in season 2 had never happened.
Oh, that's delicious. I love it.
This is a bleak and dark and uncomfortable look at the Scranton office. But there are some really good parts, mostly revolving around the game itself, obviously. Stanley's dribble is undoubtedly iconic.
What? You gotta be kidding me!
I mean, in thinking of Easter eggs for this season, that's immediately what came to mind.
Secret weapon!
But Michael's got some spotlights here too. This line, while probably something the show's gonna get canceled for in the future.
Yeah, I bet you would. Just try not to be too gay on the court.
That was improvised by Carell on the spot, and this look by Krasinski was spot on.
There it is.
And in a long list of things that I quote almost every day, I say this almost every single time I play Rocket League.
Come on! What is wrong with me today?
And I did see that Carell accidentally made his first long shot. They had to redo it, of course, because it wasn't funny that he made it. Okay, and Michael's thrusting. I mean, that's something most of my generation did in middle school, so kind of gets a chuckle. And this free throw, though, this is what slow burn comedy is. A slow but building setup to a punchline that hits the mark. And I love it. I think it's a prime example. But the rest of this episode, it never really gets there for me.
Stanley, of course.
I'm sorry?
What do you play, center?
Why, of course? What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know.
Look, humor is subjective, and I get it. If you think that this is the pinnacle of The Office's humor, then who am I to tell you that you're wrong? That's not what I'm here to do.
No, you're wrong.
I'm just gonna say this. Is this episode better than Diversity Day? According to IMDb, it is. What about...
Did I stutter?
What about The Convict?
Don't drop the soap. Don't drop the soap.
Michael, please.
So there's something more that drives people's affinity for this episode. And I gotta be honest with you.
I don't get it. I'm sorry. I don't get it.
Right, so there's the fandom who love this episode, yet when I ask for specific thoughts on why this episode is the bee's knees, I get nothing. Even browsing through the IMDb reviews, there's a lot of generic things spoken about it. Guys, I didn't come here to die on this hill. I don't care enough. Having rewatched it several times for this review, I did get a better sense of appreciation for it. All up, I am giving this one a 3 out of 5. And that's probably gracious in my opinion. I know I say this during every episode, but please, please, please overthink this one. If you love the episode, please explain to me in the comments why, or hop onto the Discord and tell me why I'm an idiot for not getting it.
No, then you're an idiot.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey, and welcome to The Office Field Guide. My name's Chris, and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today, we're looking at the hot girl.
You're like the new and improved Pam. Pam 6.0. Oh.
Yeah, that sounded kind of wrong. But the way I name these field guides, there's no way I could prevent clickbaiting. Anyway, Hot Girl was written by Mindy Kaling and directed by Amy Heckerling. Okay, because I'm not gonna do a rewatch series for season 2 just yet, we're not really gonna do a comment contest today, but I still will put in a Hidden Stanley, so if you want the street cred, find it first. Today we're gonna be talking about Amy Adams, we're gonna be talking about incentivizers.
Ooh, you're not prying this out of my hands.
And we're gonna be talking about predators.
Katie?
Ah, Katie. Wow, look at you. Just do it.
And And stay tuned to the very end of this episode for a special message to those who are watching these videos in order. And be warned, there may be spoilers for the series ahead.
Warning! 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 Warning!
And with that, let's get right into this really, really, really cringy episode.
It's okay.
Dwight. Okay, that's it. Keep it in your pants.
I understand nothing.
All right, Hot Girl is the lowest rated episode on IMDb until season 6's Mafia.
They have no idea what happened.
And in fairness, the pilot episode is rated lower, but not by much.
Pudding.
And see my thoughts on that episode in that field guide. Interestingly though, when I first released the review for this episode, it had significant traffic, and I'm not really sure why. But then I remembered this is the internet and the name of this episode is Hot Girl. Right, so if you're here to check out Hot Girls, well, who am I kidding? You probably dipped out the moment you saw me.
In order to get hotter, you take glasses off.
But let's talk about Dwight's perfect woman.
The perfect girl for me would be Kuniko Taka. She's also a survivor of monster rape.
If you're following along, we saw this anime girl on Dwight's shirt in the basketball episode. As far as scantily clad drawn women go, we find out later that Stanley...
No.
It's called hentai, and it's art.
also is a fan. And the hot girl in this episode is portrayed by Amy Adams, who's kind of a big deal these days. And it's a little jarring to see her in an episode of The Office, a series that was pretty against stunt casting for the first 4.5 seasons.
Push the reverse button! Reverse the button!
But at that time, she really was a relative nobody, says a guy on YouTube talking about The Office. I get the irony, but the point is that she only had a series of small roles on television shows, as well as a small break in Catch Me If You Can.
It's my first week. I think they're gonna fire me.
You're a jerk!
And I'm guessing here that her part in The Office was one from her few minor voice acting roles in King of the Hill, the series that Mike Judge and Greg Daniels created. So while it's kind of jarring for us, this wasn't really stunt casting, as Adams wasn't really a big deal, and she does look quite different from her role in Catch Me If You Can.
I really think those braces look good on you.
Thank you.
But it wasn't long after her time on The Office that she got the role as Susan in Talladega Nights and just blew up from there.
This is awesome. Are you climbing on the table right now?
You seem kind of hysterical to me.
My favorite role of hers is the docile and kind of sad portrayal character she played in Arrival. And she's pretty great. But other than that, this is the first time we see an outsider get to react to Michael and Dwight.
Cock in the hen house.
Cocks in the hen house.
Don't say cocks. Oh.
And Michael is borderline unbearable in this episode.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. What year were you there?
Toby's divorced. He, recently, right? You and your wife?
But more on that later. In spite of that, it's not all bad. I love that in an attempt to find something sophisticated in his mind, Michael reaches for this.
I do my best to be my own man and go by the beat of a different drummer, and nobody gets me.
And you can tell that we haven't found our permanent home in Van Nuys yet. This always trips me up. I do love the early characterization of how the Schrutes have a different way of looking at things.
Amazing breasts. Not for me, for my children. The Schrutes produce very thirsty babies.
And while watching that clip, you might be blown away by Dwight's candor, but I love watching early Creed be weird without any lines. And there's an ongoing bit in The Office in which Kevin at Pam's desk can be a bad thing.
She's prettier than you, though.
That's a very rude thing to say, Kevin.
This does remind me of being in middle school. I'd go to the malls and I'd buy some smell-alike cologne for myself or for gifts for my parents. They were always in a dollar store and they always wore off after a minute or two.
There, now you may throw it out.
I never really knew what this stuff was made of. And Michael's immaturity is shown in this episode with this statement.
What flavor?
Blue.
Blue's not a flavor.
It says flavor, Blue Blast.
Oh, Blue Blast, yes. Put that in the trunk.
As well as the messiness in his car. And I've never really understood Michael's messiness. And it's not just because from this point on his car is completely clean, but mostly because salespeople, at least the ones I've interacted with, keep pretty clean cars, just in case they need to give a client a ride or something.
Look out for Legion! Michael! Are you okay? Swim for it!
And this hasn't come up yet in this series, but I love coffee. I'm not really a snob, but I do love a good cup of coffee.
With cream and sugar?
And I share this deeply private part of my life with you to help frame this.
At the end of the month, you can reward your top seller with a prize worth up to $1,000.
Whoa, howdy ho. Wow, 1,000 big ones. That's cool. Do I get to pick the prize?
Why is this a thing that companies do? I'm sure if you polled everyone who could win the prize, they'd want the $1,000. They don't want your incentive prize. They want the money. Why is this a thing?
What about a gift basket full of cash?
Yes! Cash basket. Nice work, Tuna.
But let's talk about that in a deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Cap.
There's a motif in this episode showing incentives and decisiveness.
Decisiveness, one of the keys to success, according to Small Businessman.
So I thought it'd be fun to look at what really motivates people to be decisive. When discussing what motivates people, Dwight says,
torture.
We'll call that punishment. But then Michael points out later,
coffee is the great incentivizer in the office.
And we'll call that reward. But these are usually simple on the surface. Call it karma, heaven's will, laws of the universe. Do good things and you'll get good things. Do bad things and you'll get bad things. But it gets muddy when you start talking about people's motives.
Moms, primarily?
Rewards and punishments seem to be the basic motivators in all cultures throughout history. It's a thing that people have argued about for ages. For more on this, I would beg you to go watch The Good Place. It's a great show. But the basic idea is, if somebody does something good only because they want a reward, did they really do something good? On the contrary, if someone abstains from doing something bad only because they want to avoid punishment, did they really do good? Or was it just for selfish reasons? Thus, I think when we look at this episode, we do get some insights on the decisions that are being made and what incentivizes them. And it's interesting to see how this all plays out. The bonus is an incentive to get the employees to work hard.
It's a drug. It is quite literally a drug.
Michael's motivated to get Amy Adams' attention.
I am going to break some rules. Toby's divorced. What's up? Whoa! Oscar. Well, bloody blue to blah blah. Techno babble. Slaves. What?
Okay.
Okay.
And it is interesting that Michael's drive to please the purse peddler is at a higher priority than his employees.
I thought that was the incentive prize for the top salesperson.
Very easy to clean. Okay. He's gonna win anyway.
And since both Jim and Dwight make moves on Lois Lane, we'll put them in there too?
No.
I'm just here to learn.
Okay.
So I know about most of these, but... You know,
okay.
Though Jim's motives are a little bit more complex. They might be more of an attempt to move on, or possibly take a silent jab at Pam, which would maybe shift him from being incentivized to a motivator. Pam sees that, though she's not motivated enough by Jim as a reward to act, fearing punishment from Roy. Roy seems to be motivated by punishment too.
Man, I would be all over that if I wasn't dating Pam.
We're not dating, we're engaged.
Engaged, yeah.
Then is rewarded when he behaves accordingly.
Huh? Come on, Pammy.
And then the purse lady. I always feel kind of bad for her. She's just coming here to do her job, not to get asked out by every dude in the place.
We ride home and we stop for coffee and ...
But then, I also want to say she knows exactly what she's doing. So, reward for her? So what's the point? What's the message? I mean, so much like season 1's content, it's a look at humans in this modern world and what motivates us to perform. Chris's opinion, there should probably be a healthy balance between the threat of punishment and the promise of reward. Like wings of an airplane, if one falls, it's probably not going to operate that well. Me, for example, sometimes I'm just in it to win it. Sometimes I'm just in it to not get fired.
So just clean out your desk. I'm sorry.
But for now, let's rate this thing.
This is the worst.
Guys, I am so tired of season 1, and I'm not trying to let my bias show. Looking through this episode realistically, never mind how exceptionally low the IMDb score was, the exceptionally low viewership, and my own experiences with season 1.
What am I gonna do with a removed uterus?
this is not a good episode of The Office.
God.
I can imagine a universe in which the premise for this episode aired in season 2 or 3, and it would have landed just fine. I mean, in a sense, The Fire explores a lot of the same plot points, and it does it so much better. Michael in this episode doesn't really give me the lovable buffoon, village idiot, or really even a David Brent feel. He gives me a creepy predator vibe.
Where are you going? Nearby? Because I can give you a ride.
No.
And the lighting is strange in this one. It's very warm, and I'm not really sure it was intended to complement Enchanted's hair, or if they were just still exploring their lighting options. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure I'd call this episode my least favorite episode of the entire series, but it's up there, or down there, however you want to phrase it.
Way beyond my vocabulary.
I know where this is going.
Do you?
No.
I'm giving Hot Girl a 1 out of 5.
Torture.
Come on, Dwight.
And I'm getting the heck out of season 1 as soon as I can. But that's just what I think about Hot Girl. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say. If you completely agree with me, please validate me in the comments. It's a great motivator. If you completely disagree with me, please tell me why in the comments. I want to hear why you think this is a good episode of The Office.
Sex.
And if you're still with me watching these videos in order, I need to give you a heads up. I started this series with season 1 in 2019, and in this year, 2021, I wasn't quite satisfied with how season 1 felt, as they didn't really vibe with how I'm making videos these days. So if you're watching sequentially, there's going to be a different format from season 2 and kind of half of season 3, and then you're gonna see me again.
They have no idea what happened.
I'm having a blast making these videos, and I'm sure I'll give certain episodes in season 2 a rewatch treatment at some point also.
Hi, Graham. Hope you brought the milk duds.
But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate everyone who's watching this stuff, and we'll see you next time.